live and holding. All right, we're live, and 3, 2, 1.
Demagogic leftists have wasted no time in pouncing on the horrific massacre in Florida to demonize conservatives while offering not one single solution that would have prevented the violence. Lefties insist we need to ban guns. Conservatives say we need to lock up lunatics. We will analyze the nuts and bolts of the gun control debate point by hollow point. Then our youth culture correspondent, Andy Millennial, joins the show to give a young person's perspective on the violence, policy proposals, and the future of conservatism broadly. Finally, the mailbag. I'm Michael Knowles, and this is The Michael Knowles Show. The demagogic left is especially awful on these issues. People have read the facts of the case. I think Ben was talking about the facts of this awful shooting earlier today. I'll talk a little bit more about the reaction. The former Congressman Joe Walsh pointed out that a semi-automatic weapon means one pull of the trigger and one bullet comes out. That's what a semi-auto is. Nobody knows what these means because there are all these euphemisms flying around. Assault weapons, which was a term that was just invented to demagogue and compare regular semi-automatic rifles, which have been around for a very long time, to assault rifles where there's an automatic weapon. So he pointed out that he's not just firing a machine gun, it's one trigger pull, one bullet comes out. Some dummy on Twitter responds. He says, defending an AR-15 while 17 children lay dead, you're part of the problem, sir. And this is the really awful thing about this, because we are accused, if we look at this awful shooting, the left would like to pretend that gun rights people who support the Second Amendment, are thrilled at these shootings. We say, oh, how wonderful. Oh, tee-hee-hee, lovey-dovey-dovey. But of course that isn't the case. And to accuse us of not taking this seriously, they are projecting, because it is exactly the left that does not take this seriously. They say there's this awful problem. We say, right, here are the facts of the problem. How can we fix it? And they say, how dare you talk about the facts? How dare you observe the reality of these guns and the reality of these gun control laws? You're a heartless, you're a monster, you're part of the problem. They are the problem. The left is a huge part of the problem in this issue because they won't have a serious conversation about the actual mechanics of gun control, of firearms, of mental health in the country. They're the ones stopping that conversation by shouting down anybody who's willing to point out simple facts, such as a semi-automatic rifle is a rifle where you pull the trigger once and one bullet comes out. So the FBI and the local authorities clearly failed to stop this threat, despite knowing about it. That is all irrelevant to CNN, though. We know that government bureaucracies are never going to get better at these sorts of things, so we can't rely on that. The government was supposed to enforce some threats that they got. They were aware of this. There were laws on the books that they probably could have used, and they just didn't do it. But that's the nature of bureaucracies. We will get to some gun control numbers in a second. Here is CNN. CNN, which was there on the scene to demagogue the situation.
Do you have a message for the lawmakers? Do you have a message for Congress, for the president?
Yeah. My message to lawmakers in Congress is please take action. Ideas are great. Ideas are wonderful and they help you get reelected and everything. But what's more important is actual action and pertinent action that results in saving thousands of children's lives. Please take action.
Do you have a sense of what kind of action that would be?
Any action at this point, instead of just complete stagnancy and blaming the other side of the political aisle, would be a step in the right direction. And working together to save these children's lives is what this country needs.
So that is David Hogg. He survived the shooting, and I'm not criticizing him for this statement. He's some shaken-up 18-year-old, presumably, who just saw people get shot. So I'm not criticizing him for this statement. I will point out what he said. It means absolutely nothing, right? He said that we need action. And CNN was waiting for him to say, please, what kind of action? Assault weapons ban, this ban, that ban, that ban. But he didn't even go that far. He said, we just need some action. But then he said, ideas are good, but really we need action. And he was just saying words that sort of sounded like they mean something, but obviously they don't. I'm criticizing CNN because they went down there and they put this kid on television and they want to make a big splash out of it. You know, these cute little kids who are saying we need to do this, and it's this awful, awful event, and they want to tug on our heartstrings to make us pass more laws to take away guns from lawful gun owners, even though none of those laws would do a thing to prevent shootings like this. The Media Research Center reviewed the big networks, ABC, CBS, NBC. They reviewed their gun coverage from 2012 to 2013. They found 216 stories on guns. It skewed 8-1 to advocate Barack Obama's gun control policies. At that time, Barack Obama was pushing a slew of gun control legislation. 8-1, they favored his legislation. Gun control advocates appeared 26 times compared to just 7 times for constitutional activists and Second Amendment advocates. CBS, the network of Cronkite and Rather, ran anti-gun stories at a rate of 22-1. 22-1. Not just the way it is, those are just the facts at CBS. And it wasn't just the big networks. Here is a typical example of CNN's coverage of the Second Amendment.
Not everyone in Colorado wants more guns in the hands of its own people. State Representative Rhonda Fields is one of them. This is a quote coming from an employee at a gun shop. He said, "A lot of people are saying, I didn't think I needed a gun, but now I do." Representative Fields, if this person was sitting right there next to you, what would you tell him? I have to challenge you. Why hasn't your party, the Democratic Party, done more to legislate guns? Because as you know, that assault weapons ban expired in 2004.
Wow, really hard-hitting, really powerful questions, really putting truth to power, because CNN just exists to tee up these little softballs for Democrats to make their points that are basically irrelevant to the debate. Let's go through the nuts and bolts of what can be done about gun control and trying to stop these shootings. Let's start with the bolts, the facts that pertain to the guns themselves. There are 20,000 gun control laws on the books. Brookings Institution, the left-leaning think tank, disputes this because they modify it and they say there aren't 20,000 relevant laws, but that neglects all of the local laws and all of the local regulations. A solid estimate, it's hard to tell because there are so many gun laws on the books, but a very solid estimate would be 20,000, and there may be many more than that. That number, by the way, has been accepted for 50 years until recently because people don't want to believe that there are 20,000 gun laws on the books and they're still not stopping these incidents that we see on CNN. Democrat Representative John Dingell explained as early as 1965, quote, "We now have on the law books of this nation 20,000 laws governing the sale, distribution, and use of firearms." By the way, interesting to note, 1965 was 3 years before the Gun Control Act of 1968, which was spurred by the deaths of RFK and Martin Luther King. This was 3 years before that we had 20,000 laws on the books. As for the semi-automatic rifle, they say, because they always go after the AR-15, because it's big and black and scary, is basically why the TV goes after it. It's an easy target, even though it isn't like these sort of black, terrifying machine guns that we see and fully automatic rifles that we see in war zones. It isn't like that at all. AR does not stand for assault rifle. It stands for Armalite, the company that makes it. Even on that, if they want to ban semi-automatic rifles, one pull, one bullet, the semi-automatic rifle has existed since 1885. This wasn't invented in 1970, it wasn't invented in 1960, it wasn't invented in 1990. It's been around for well over a century. And if we're going to remove that, we might as well go back to the musket, I suppose. That's going to be the next call from them. Another thing to note is mass shootings are not getting more frequent. So the murder rate in 2011 was almost exactly the same as the raw number of murders in 2011 was almost exactly the same as the raw number of murders in 1969. But since we've added 110 million more Americans since then, the murder rate in 1969 was about 55% higher than it is today. Overall, the murder rate is declining precipitously. So that gets to the point here. We will never eradicate these crimes because the imagination of man's heart is evil from the beginning. It is easy for left utopians to believe that eventually we can perfect human nature and stop war and stop violence. But it ain't going to happen as long as human beings are around. We've never seen any example of it in the history of the world. Nothing we know from philosophy or history or biology suggests that will ever be the case. There's also no evidence that the expiration of the assault weapons ban in 2004 has affected gun violence whatsoever. Even Politico reports this. All available evidence shows gun laws will not significantly affect incidence or severity of mass shootings. Other studies show that large capacity magazine bans, as have been advocated in recent years in my own home state of New York, concealed carry laws have had little to no effect on mass shootings, one way or the other. Doesn't move the needle. According to the FBI in 2011, I can't believe we have to rehearse all of these numbers, but now it's considered hateful and uncaring and uncompassionate to even point out these numbers or name any facts when it comes to the debate, because unless you have a quivering lip, you're not considered an authority and not credible to talk on this topic. According to the FBI in 2011, 323 people were killed by rifles of any type. Bolt action, semi-automatic, the dreaded AR-15. 496 people were killed by clubs or hammers that same year. 726 people were killed by hands or feet that year, twice as many as were killed by any kind of rifle, including assault weapons, so-called assault weapons. And 1,694 people were murdered with knives, over 5 times as many people as were killed by rifles. Rifles of any kind, including the AR-15, including the dreaded semi-automatic rifle that's existed since 1885. Far and away, the biggest killer was handguns, at 6,220 deaths, though 60% of those deaths were suicides, mostly among middle-aged men. That's the bolts of this gun control argument. Marco Rubio pointed this out a few years ago. Even the Washington Post, even PolitiFact said it was true. None of these laws that Democrats are throwing out, vaguely throwing out or specifically throwing out, and calling Republicans uncompassionate monsters for not taking them up, none of those laws, not a single one of those laws would have prevented any of these shootings that we've seen that are so horrific on television. We have to get to the nut side of this equation, but before we get to that, we have got to talk about something a little bit nicer than this topic of the day, something that that will certainly improve health. That is Omax 3 Ultra Pure supplements. Kind of like we were talking about nuts, nuts are good for your health. Omax 3 is very good too. Taking care of your health is a commitment, and that can feel overwhelming. That's why I've been loving Omax 3 Ultra Pure supplements. That is Omax 3. You just need to do one little thing to experience big health benefits, and you don't even have to think about it. So, we're always talking about ways to be healthier, happier on this show, have a more fulfilling life, and not be so angry and in the news cycle all the time. So when tons of studies have shown that something improves your health, we have got to talk about it. And you've probably heard about the many benefits of getting your daily dose of omega-3s. People have noted this for decades and decades. Now I want to talk about the purest way to get them with Omax 3 Ultra Pure. If you're going to do something, why not do it right? Omax 3 is the purest omega-3 supplement on the market, and it contains nearly 94% of high-quality omega-3s. There's this really cool thing. You can look it up online. They do something called the freezer test, because everyone sells omega-3s. These are very common supplements. A lot of people take them. If you put them in the freezer, the generic whatever brand, and then Omax Ultra Pure, Omax 3 Ultra Pure supplements, when you take them out of the freezer, you'll notice that the Omax supplements look fine. They look exactly like they did when you put them in. And the other ones get all cloudy and disgusting. That is because they're so pure. It's the purest concentration on the market. That is how pure it is. So they're amazing at alleviating joint pain, muscle soreness. They make you feel your best post-workout. I obviously don't know anything about how one feels post-workout, but they make you feel good even if you don't do that. They can also improve focus and memory, boost cardiovascular health, and more. Just makes sense to take your daily omega-3 supplement. There are no fish burps. This is something people complain about with omega-3s, is that they'll get something called fish burps. There are many on the market. This is the purest, most concentrated one, so you don't have to worry about that. And they even have a 60-day money-back guarantee. So you'll have plenty of time to try it and really feel the Omax difference. Have I ever led you wrong? I don't. Maybe don't answer that question. I'm not leading you wrong on this. Go to tryomax.com/covfefe, C-O-V-F-E-F-E, today to get a box of Omax 3 Ultra Pure for free. What are you waiting for? I don't say I never did anything for you. It's absolutely free. And by the way, speaking of that code, it does pair very well with Covfefe. So if you have a nice piping hot glass of Covfefe and some Omax 3, it's good. It's guaranteed to boost your health. Try Omax, that is tryomax.com/covfefe, C-O-V-F-E-F-E, to get your free box of Omax 3. Tryomax.com/covfefe. Terms and conditions apply. Don't they always in this life? Okay, on the nuts side of this equation, it is now virtually impossible to commit someone against his will to a mental institution. All states now require that you prove clear and convincing evidence that someone is imminently dangerous to themselves or others. Imminent means 24 to 72 hours. If they're going to commit some awful thing in 24 to 72 hours, you maybe can commit them, otherwise you can't. People blame Ronald Reagan for this. It actually was underway long before he arrived on the scene, though he was active in politics while these institutions closed. There were 37,500 mental patients in California in 1959. That was before the Gipper. Reagan entered in 1967. By that time, the number was already down to 22,000. It continued to decline and kept dropping for years. This is in part because we had new drugs that would be able to hopefully cure people and not have them be faced there, and there were also reports that these institutions weren't very nice. Clearly, this kid should have been institutionalized. I won't even use his name. He's a little demon from Florida. I won't use his name. He clearly should have been institutionalized. When he was a little kid, he used to kill animals. He posted on social media that he wanted to shoot up a school. He was reported to the local authorities and to the FBI for saying these sorts of things, being an all-around weirdo. His recently deceased mother apparently reported him to the police, sat down with the police and her son, and discussed what a deranged monster he is. So why aren't they talking about this? Because it's harder for Democrats to argue for institutions, because that might be a partial solution to this problem. It's much harder to say, well, we need to lock up lunatics. So they have to keep demagoguing the gun control arguments that we know for certain, we know with as much certainty as we can in public policy, that they won't achieve anything, because the only reason they're doing this is because they occasionally help Democrats achieve the only thing they really care about on this issue, raising money and winning re-election. Speaking of kids who should be institutionalized, we are so lucky that we have our youth culture correspondent here, Andy Millennial. Andy, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. So I was wondering, we were talking about this shooting. What is your take on this horrific shooting as a millennial?
You know, as a millennial, I have to say that this was a pretty good mass murder for me. You know, I got some pictures on my cell phone, put them up on YouTube, and they got over 100,000 hits. And then I even did a piece on, a hit on CNN, which I thought was one of my better hits, about how upset I was and how much I wanted gun control. And I was going to, I also put some pictures of myself crying, because I was very upset about it. My picture of crying got a lot of likes so I think people are really moved by my tears on Instagram. I think that really, so as mass murders go, I think I did pretty well here.
Have you considered, Andy, looking into an internship at CNN?
That's kind of my next step. I think if when you put the crying together with the gun control, you're basically a CNN anchor.
I will say, in every one of your appearances on this show, your ability to make your lip quiver has been really impressive. It's been really, really good.
That's what I bring to the to the conversation. I was afraid that I was actually going to bite into this.
I love that we just had Tide Pods lying around in general. I don't know what the animators are getting up to in the back there, and the producers.
Yeah.
That is. I've got to send you. There are videos of people on the internet just chomping down into these, just detergent pouring out of their mouth.
We should say that we're not making fun, of course, of any of this terrible thing that happened, but it is insane what they do on TV.
It's awful. Actually, for that little that little back and forth, I have no compunction about doing that sort of thing whatsoever, because it is so despicable what CNN does in these events. They trot them out like these awful shootings. They trot them out like the perfect little circus to push their ridiculous policies.
It's amazing, and at the core of this, there are people genuinely suffering. It's a genuine atrocity, and then it kind of goes out, irradiates out, and by the time it gets to CNN and to the networks too, because they do it too, they're just using these tears, as a kind of magic potion to sell their stupid gun control.
And they're using the tears to shut other people up.
They're
people using those tears to make us look uncompassionate, because we want to look at the actual facts of the situation and try to do anything that might help it.
The funny thing is, strange, is that really, if you looked at it rightly, liberals, leftists, and right-wingers could stand together and weep over what actually is happening, and then go to their corners and argue about what to do, and that would be the fair way to do it. But that because their ideas don't make any sense, and because the facts keep contradicting them, they just have to carry those tears on. And when we say, let's wait until the emotions pass, they're going, how long must we wait? Let's not wait. Last time they were screaming, that waiting itself was wrong. Being reasonable itself was wrong.
Thoughts and prayers and waiting are wrong.
I know, and CNN has now become like a tear fest. It really is like being in a sorority where like these people going, all they do is cry.
Well, it's very funny because in my living room, it's also a tear fest when we watch CNN. It's just tears of laughter and joy when we keep them on. Yeah. Do you think, because you're right, they say that we can't wait, we can't have thoughts, we can't have prayers, we can't think, we can't mourn even together. Is it a weird twitch of materialism of their thinking that thoughts and prayers are actually meaningless?
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, that has to play into it. And is there some aspect of this that is just, they don't actually care about the event itself. They're so frenzied in scoring points that they don't even see the tragedy. They just jump to score the points.
It is an amazing, it seems to me to be, I think, I won't say that they don't care. It seems to me a confusion of their feelings with their thoughts. Like we really have lost the idea. You know, it's the old Aristotelian idea that your inner state is important. Your pleasures and your joy, your eudaimonia, whatever they call it.
Eudaimonia.
Thank you. Only you would know that.
That's
word.
the only Greek word I know.
That it's important, but it has to be trained to attach itself to reason. And what they've lost that little part of it. So that what they think is because they're upset, it matters. It matters that they're upset, and it doesn't. I mean, it's the same way that college kids think I'm offended by that. My feeling is, get some harder feelings.
Yeah, you need to build up those feelings calluses.
I mean, this is the sale from the left, is that everything is about your feelings. And I think that's basically it. It's not that they don't care. It's that they think that the fact that they care gives them some moral high ground, and it doesn't. We all care. Yeah. We all care. Of course we do. Nobody wants to see this happen. But that doesn't mean you're right. You
know what I think it is like? I'll get us in more trouble for making this analogy. Yeah. There are a lot of sketches on the internet that go around about this problem.
Yeah.
You know, when you come back and your girlfriend has had a hard day, she's really upset and there's some problem. She's upset. You say, "What's the problem?" And then your girlfriend tells you what the problem is. And then you say, "Okay, well, I think the way you can fix it is this, this, and this." She says, "I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to be sad with me." You say, "But I'm trying to, how dare you try to, that's what CNN is doing. That's what the mainstream media do on these kind of issues. We say, "Okay, we'd like to fix it. We'd like to help you fix it."
It really is womanish. I use the word womanish because it's actually the opposite.
Because it's a phenomenal word.
It's a great word. It's the opposite of womanly. It is to womanly what like macho is to manly.
Right. Childish to childlike.
That's exactly right. It is womanish. It is like having a woman who cries so that you're willing to do anything just to get her to stop crying, and that's what they think we're going to do. And just after a while, guys catch on.
That's right. Isn't going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Isn't going to happen. CNN.
Yeah.
Where do you see? I was down. So. That takes us through this topic. What I want to know, I was down in Palm Beach at the Kudera Institute. We were doing this panel a couple days ago on the future of American conservatism.
Ooh,
and we've got this awful future of mainstream media, maybe. But it was me, it was Ramesh Ponnuru from National Review, great guy, and Mike Frank from Hoover, and Al Felsenberg, who wrote the Buckley biography. And I think I was the only Covfefe advocate on the panel.
You're the only, the National Review crowd.
National Review doesn't exactly love El Presidente. I was certainly the most vocally pleased with this administration.
Yeah.
What is the future of American conservatism in the age of Trump?
Well, it's a really good question because Trump is important at least in two very specific ways. I mean, one is the fact that he has shattered, I think that this is the thing that all these never-Trumpers and the intellectual anti-Trumpers do not understand. He has shattered this glass bubble that has surrounded conservatism for 30 years, 40 years. I mean, this idea that there are things you can't say, that there are ideas you can't introduce, that I'm crying, so don't say guns are good. He shattered that, if only because he's too boorish in some ways to pay any attention to it.
He's not sensitive enough to see it.
This is something, the slavery of political correctness is something that drives people crazy. And it pushes them so far to the right, they go off the reservation. I mean, it makes people overreact. And, when you look at Europe, where people can literally be harassed by the police for criticizing Islam or for saying certain things that are considered hateful, it means that the elite are free to do whatever they want without us saying, you're wrong. I'm sorry, I may wash cars for a living, you may have a PhD, but you're wrong and I'm right. So Trump has been really important, and in that way he has been almost totally a good thing. The other way is this push toward what they call populism, and I'm not sure that's the right word for it, because what he has done is he has reconnected the Republican Party to that base that used to be part of Reagan's party. It actually used to be Democrats.
They were the Reagan Democrats,
They were the Reagan, and he has reconnected to them, and we lose touch with them. It's funny because you and I are probably people who would lose touch with them because we are, theoretical. We think in intellect, and sometimes people are going, yeah, but I can't feed my kids. What do I do here?
Right.
And to have some intellectual conservative saying, well, this is wrong and that's wrong. You got to answer the question first. Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to?
How deeply has he read Tocqueville?
Right.
I know that he's going to reform your taxes and create jobs and growth. But how deeply has he read Strauss and Tocqueville?
That's right. So you have to come up with other kinds of answers. Trump has been bad for conservatism in that way, in a certain way, because he does not care.
Yeah.
He doesn't care that we need to reform entitlements. And the arguments for reforming entitlements are simple. People live longer.
Yeah.
You can't. It used to be that you collected at 65, but you died at 63. It doesn't cost as much. It doesn't cost as much as when you're collecting at 80. So I think that this is the part of Trump that we have to deal with. It's not the tweets. It's not the rudeness. Those are things that actually are working in our favor.
Yeah.
It is the spending and the fact that he never, even though in the old days he used to talk about debt, he didn't run on that. And he doesn't seem to care. And that is something we're going to have to confront at some point because you do go off the cliff.
I do wonder, this is really maybe the optimistic side here, is I wonder if he could be a Nixon in China when it comes to entitlements, because he signaled it a few months ago, I thought that he was using the phrase welfare reform to hint at entitlement reform, because these are welfare programs. I thought Rubio and Ryan started to move in that direction. We don't know. He said, I'm not going to touch Social Security. But when it comes to the big spending sends shivers up my spine. But if he's going to spend a little more domestically on whatever programs he's going to do, he's going to beef up the military. That is a drop in the bucket compared to the long-term liability of entitlements.
Right.
If he somehow came around to that, it would be the most excellent presidency.
It would be an amazing presidency. It's been an amazing presidency so far. One of the things about Trump is that he is such a big character that the bigness of his character obscures who he is in some ways. So, for instance, is he a guy who sleeps with porn stars? Probably. Do I care? No, I do not care. Do I think that's a good thing to do? No. But is that what he does for me? No. He runs the government for me. That's what I pay him to do. So, he is a guy who learns stuff. And he is a guy who will make an argument to his base that's unpopular. He will go back to with the DACA thing, where he's saying, yes, I will give you a path to citizenship, but I want this, 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 and this. And if he doesn't get that, he won't sign. He's willing to do that. And he does learn stuff in office, and he is willing to go back to his base. So it wouldn't shock me if he said, you know what, I said I wasn't going to cut entitlements. I'm not going to cut them, but I am going to reform them. It'll take them a little later because you're going to live 20 years longer.
Right.
I think
and he can do that. He always levels with people. He writes about it, or somebody wrote about it, and he at least read it in The Art of the Deal, which is that he'll ask for 99% and then in order to get 51%.
Right.
He never, it's really a lovely thing that he does as a politician, that all these other politicians would try to worm their way into, once they flip-flopped, trying to explain how they didn't flip-flop. Right. And Trump just sort of says, I don't know, now this is what I think. Yeah. Before I thought this, and now I think this.
I know, he does. And so there is that chance. I don't understand. Conservatism has always ridden on the back of the Republican Party.
Right.
The Republican Party has not been conservative. It has
almost ever.
Ever. And in fact, the two most conservative presidents we've had in my lifetime were Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton after Newt Gingrich. Yeah. Is that what Bill Clinton believed? I don't think Bill Clinton believed anything.
Right.
He just
still doesn't.
He did what he could get away with, and on both sides of that equation. And he was a good conservative president. This guy has been a great conservative president, Trump, and he's a belligerent guy who sleeps with porn stars. It's like that's also true. I can live with that. He's not my son-in-law. I don't have to worry about who he's sleeping with. So it's like
One thing confuses me about the followers of Bill Buckley, and I count myself among them. Yeah. So I'm confused by those at National Review and other places who say that it's so awful that he doesn't articulate these high-minded principles and he isn't always talking about these abstractions. Bill Buckley, by the end of his life, criticized vehemently the George Bush II administration for dealing primarily in abstractions, for dealing in what he called Wilsonianism, Wilsonian conservatism. Yeah. He criticized that aspect of conservatism immensely. And here, I think we have the response to that. We have something that is clearly not abstract. It's very tangible. The words he uses are tangible. The policies he's advocating are tangible. And it is bizarre to me that the conservative movement, in the light of Bill Buckley, would ignore what he was talking about for the last several years of his life.
You know, I'm perfectly willing to sit and have a conversation about the moral hazards down the line of having a president who says some of the things he says and who behaves. Yeah, you know, I'm willing to have that conversation. What I'm not willing to do is sacrifice present gains for things that may or may not happen because I'm afraid they'll happen or I can picture them happening. When you sit and think of what would have happened, all these guys who didn't vote for Donald Trump and, you know, said, I'm too, you know, they're too evil for me to vote for him. You know, when you think what would have happened with a Hillary Clinton presidency, the judges who would now be in place, and this whole idea, well, Republicans would have stopped her. When have they ever stopped anything?
They don't stop anything.
They don't stop anything. They can barely govern conservatively with Donald Trump in the White House. So, you know, the judges who would have been in place, I really do believe we would have lost the Second Amendment. I think the First Amendment would have been
gutted. It would have been gutted. She was campaigning on gutting the First Amendment.
Gutting it, you know, and so I think that we dodged a bullet. We didn't dodge it any thanks to them. I think that they should all stand up. I mean, I voted for him, but I stood up and said, look, I opposed him. I think he's done a good job. You know, hey, I don't know the future. I'm doing the best I can.
We both variously did TV commercials for Ted Cruz.
That's
during
right.
the time.
Absolutely.
Speaking of porn stars, and but ultimately I came around and voted for him too, and I'm very pleased that I did.
Yep.
I understood the arguments not to. I understand that that's compelling in some way, but now that we know, looking back on this phenomenal year we've gotten, I don't think there's any way to say, oh, I'm glad I didn't vote for the guy.
Yeah, and I am more than willing to say, like, I don't like this new budget. I think he's, I don't like the fact that he's not thinking about the debt. I think the debt matters, and I think it's a problem, and I think he knows it's a problem. And he's a businessman. He understands it's a problem. You know, I'm perfectly willing to criticize him. What I'm not willing to criticize him on is every damn thing he says, especially when CNN and the rest, I'm now using CNN as a, you know, what is it called?
It's a metonym.
It's a
metonym.
Good, yeah.
I've got all these obscure words that are just coming out
today.
today.
I love coming in. You know, but the press takes everything he says and spins it to its worst possible meaning. So if he comes in and he says there are good people on both sides of the Robert E. Lee statue equation, oh my God, he's siding with white supremacists. You know, do. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to appease it. I'm not going to give it any credence whatsoever. But I will criticize him on policy. Every president should be criticized on policy. Nobody's above criticism. I just think he's doing a good job.
And this, by the way, people say that we've always held our conservative leaders to account. Bill Buckley in 1968 endorsed Richard Nixon over his good friend Ronald Reagan. He endorsed him for president because he felt he was more viable. He was tested. He went in there. Nixon did a bunch of terrible things, founded the EPA, a number of other agencies, and Bill Buckley still defended him because of the practical concern is I'm not going to knock him on these little things. Overall, we're getting decent policy out of the guy until China, until he felt that his stance on the Soviet Union and communism was too weak. Then he turned on him. But it wasn't this, I'll hit him here, I won't hit him there, I'll hit him there, I don't like this. He made his decision. There's a long history in the conservative movement. And I hope that what we see for the future of the conservative movement is kind of fusionism, but whatever that is for the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I can live with a lot of liberal, you know, annoying liberal things, and I can even live with a welfare state if we can keep the welfare state under control and keep it reasonable. I think we're old enough at this point to support a welfare state. It actually does keep people from panicking at some level. But when it gets up to the European world or the world that Obama imagined in that video he did, The Life of Julia, where every minute that you live is governed by the state, I start to think, no, we've got to dial this back. I believe so deeply in individual freedom. You know, and I'm going to fight that. You have to fight that every day.
Right.
Every day they're against it. And so if I win today, that's a victory. And if tomorrow Donald Trump becomes, you know, a bad guy, then that'll be tomorrow's problem.
If I win today, that's a victory. If I eat a Tide Pod tomorrow, somebody else will have to win that victory for me.
I just want to know, how stupid are these people? Like, I mean, what on earth has happened to our children that they are putting soap, detergent,
just delicious laundry detergent? Well, if you have any extras out there, save some for me after the segment. We've got to go.
I got them fried now.
Andy Millennial, ladies and gentlemen, the youth cultural correspondent. We've got to go. We've got to say goodbye to YouTube and Facebook. Obviously, I'm not talking to anybody on YouTube right now because they censor anytime they see my swarthy complexion come on, they immediately censor whatever videos we have. So if you're on Facebook, though, you got to go to dailywire.com right now. What do you get? You get the Michael Knowles Show. You get the Andrew Klavan Show, who bears a striking resemblance to Andy Millennial. You get the Ben Shapiro Show. You get, you know, the mailbag questions. You get blah, blah, blah. But you get this, guys. And, you know, CNN, though, this is not only the FDA-approved vessel for all salty leftist tears, but especially the demagogic CNN leftist tears. It's really good for those, and I think it's the only safe way to store them. So make sure to go to dailywire.com right now. We will be back with the mailbag.